You are listening to Within Tolerance, a podcast for machinists by a machinist. I'm your host, Dylan Jackson of Protean Machining, and this week I am very happy to welcome Jim Belosic of SendCutSend. How's it going, Jim?
Good. Thanks for having me. This is awesome.
My pleasure. So, as I told you before we started, I really doubt that anybody doesn't know who SendCutSend is if they're listening to this podcast, but please give us the 30,000-foot view. What does SendCutSend do?
We are an on-demand manufacturer, so we specialize in sheet metal. People send their files to us, we cut them and send them to their door. So anything that you can do in sheet metal, whether it's CNC bending, laser cutting, tapping, powder coating, etc. Our goal is to take your design, whip it together, and then get it to your door within 2 to 4 days. Right now, that's kind of our target.
That's amazing. Well, let's get into your backstory, and I kind of want to take it back. I know that you kind of got into this as a car guy, but I know before this you also had a software company, and I kind of want to touch on Pancake Laboratories, and also take it back even further to Jim's Pancakes because
God.
Well, we got to bring that up because I saw that and I immediately thought, like, was that a very good teaching moment about the power of kind of social media before even social media was as big as it is?
Oh man. Yeah, no, you're dead on. I never thought about it that way. So going all the way back, I've always been an artist. I taught myself graphic design in order to actually make money as an artist. It's really hard to sell paintings, I guess. I don't know how those guys do it. But I realized that with graphic art and marketing, you could actually make a living. So very early on, when I was 17, started a little graphic design agency doing business cards and brochures and posters and whatnot for people. And then kind of grew that into a little bit larger agency where we were doing some advertising for clients and marketing for clients. And this is about the same time that websites were being more ubiquitous. So I was learning how to design websites and sell those to my customers. And then on a few years later, what is this, 2009, maybe 2010, something like that, Facebook started becoming a thing. And we had a bunch of customers who were like, hey, what is Facebook? What can I do on Facebook with my business? How do we figure this out? I was like, I don't know. I'm gonna see what I can do. So I just started posting stuff on Facebook, and in order to test out some of the business features, like they had these special pages for businesses, I was like, I'm just gonna throw something up there personal, just to test how to upload photos and how to manage comments and stuff. So at the time, my daughter, she was about 3 or 4 years old. And every weekend we would make breakfast together. And she's, being a 3-4-year-old girl, she, would love pancakes, but she didn't want a normal pancake. She wanted, Mickey Mouse. And I was like, okay, I can do that. And, any dad can do a Mickey Mouse pancake. And then she was like, well, I want a princess. I was like, well, I don't know how the hell to do that. So I figured it out. And then she's like, hey, I want a unicorn. And then I want a Ferris wheel. And I want the Golden Gate Bridge. So every week we kind of challenged each other to do some sort of crazy creation. I would write a little blog about it and take some photos, post it on Facebook, and then holy crap, it just blew up. So yes, that is my very first experience with, how something can go viral on social media, the power of social media. Having a cute little 3-year-old daughter helps.
Right.
I think we had a lot of following, and then got invited to go on the Rachel Ray show, which was super cool. Got to make pancakes with Rachel Ray. And then actually had a book deal come out of it. Penguin Publishers reached out to me, and we made a pancake book, how to make pancakes. And anyway, so that
and I'm guessing that's where the name Pancake Laboratories came from.
Yes.
Because that was 3 years later or something like that after you started that?
Yes. So we were running the agency at the same time, but then we were also developing this product, for Facebook, for businesses. And so the the agency was Belosic Creative or Belosic ADG. And then we wanted to have this self-serve product. And we didn't really know what the name was going to be. But everyone was making fun of me for all this pancake fame, which is like the last thing I wanted. I was like, how come I could be famous for working on Porsches or something like that, and then maybe Porsche sends me one. Instead, I had Bisquick sending me pancake mix. So, but everyone's making fun of me. So when we had to name this product, we're like, okay, let's spin it off into a new entity. We'll just go deep in. We'll call it Pancake Laboratories, and then our product was called ShortStack. So ShortStack.com was the new product, and that was really my first successful software business.
That's amazing. Yeah, I found all of this out in reverse order. So I was like, oh, ShortStack. Okay. And kind of started diving down. Then I was like, oh, okay, Pancake Laboratories. Yeah, that makes sense. And then some article that I found mentioned Jim's Pancakes. And I was like, what is this? And you look it up and there's no website anymore. So I had to go the Wayback Machine and found it. I'm like, oh, okay. But that's super cool. And I think it, maybe if you got some shit at the time about it, that, it is what it is. But looking back on it, it just shows your business acumen of you turned something silly with your daughter into a book deal and all of this stuff, and then use that as branding for your company.
Yeah. And I guess that's the takeaway that I still use today, which is if you have a really good product or something that's very interesting, it's exceedingly easy to market it. Being on the agency side, I have advertised and marketed, hundreds and hundreds of products. And the ones that are the least successful are just garbage products. It's so easy to make something go viral when you're doing something unique with a cute kid, and all the moms on the internet love it. Or it's so easy when you have a really simple product that people are just telling their friends about. And it almost doesn't need advertising or marketing. I've actually turned down projects in the agency world where I was like, I can't do any better than what you're already doing, because it's such a good product. It almost needs no marketing. So I'm sure there's marketers out there that are cringing listening to this, but I believe it to be true. And it's the same thing that we do with SendCutSend. It's just wow the customer, blow them away. And you don't have to spend as much money in advertising and marketing because your customers should be doing it yourself.
Right. They're
doing it for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm missing this through line then. How did you go? I know you were a car guy at the same time, but how did you go from successful marketing, Facebook product, all this stuff, to what is probably one of the largest laser cutting businesses in the world now?
Yeah. I've always been, a fabricator or, I'm not a good welder, but I can kind of weld, usually due to a need because I was working on a car. I've grown up with cars and in addition to cars, like anything with wheels, nothing with wings. My wife doesn't like me messing with stuff with the wings, but if it floats or has wheels, I've tried to mess with it. So I always had something in the garage, and during when the software company started taking off and we built a team and the company was running really well, I realized I had a little more time to spend in the garage. Instead of 80 hours a week building software, I could do 40 hours a week doing that and then sneak in, 10 hours on the weekends. So started building crazier and crazier projects, especially with my CTO, Jacob Graham. He and I, we started off as neighbors, ended up working together and building companies together. So he is a big car guy too. So we would kind of collaborate on each other's wild ideas. As our ideas got crazier, we realized we needed access to better equipment. So we went down to the SEMA show in Las Vegas, and we saw the Torchmate 4800, I think, a 4x8 plasma table. And I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. If we had access to this would be so cool. But it was like $34,000 or something. It was real money. But we started having the idea, okay, what if we let other people use it? Because we had to work during the week. So what if we could just use it on the weekend, but then loan it out to somebody to use, during the week? So that was kind of the seed of SendCutSend. We quickly realized that plasma, just wasn't gonna. Well, it cut it, but it wasn't gonna cut it. You know,
Right? Yeah, all the dross, all that stuff. It just got kind of a pain.
Yeah, the post processing involved was really really challenging. So, that's when we discovered laser cutting, because I needed these really tiny intricate parts for a steam powered car that I was building. And on some of the gauges and stuff, I wanted to do this really intricate script lettering. And I tried it like 50 times on the plasma, and I just couldn't get it to work. So Drew Miles, who's he heads up our R&D department. He was like, hey, you can use a laser for that, right? It's like, no way. There's, there can't be lasers like that. Because I had only played with like a laser pointer before in my life. So he had a local shop. He had a buddy over there, and they cut out these parts, and I couldn't believe how accurate and perfect and amazing these were. So I was like, okay, let's buy a laser. And then I realized that they are a lot of money.
Yeah.
Real money. But at the time, the software company was going well. And at the same time, though, it wasn't very satisfying. We're doing B2B SaaS, on social media, and it's just kind of like, it's kind of gross. My kids had no idea what the hell I did all day. They're like, my dad works for like a pancake company, I think, and he works on the computer a lot. But they knew all my builds. They're like, oh, but he's building this, electric car. He's building a steam powered car. He's doing all this other stuff. And so anyway, it's a way of saying my true love was always working with my hands and fabricating. So I kind of saw this opportunity to where, okay, maybe we can leverage our software experience and go more into the fabrication side, and actually, like everyone says nowadays, mess with atoms instead of bits.
Okay.
So
this actually might be a great time before we get down into the SendCutSend journey. A lot of the people who listen to this podcast are car guys as well, me included. Tell me about Teslanda. Tell me about your steam powered car real quick. Just give us the highlights, because I thought both of those, looking into them, are pretty amazing builds.
Yeah. No, thank you. And I hope I can do a couple more here pretty soon. I ran out of space. Teslanda was, I took my first car, which was a 1981 Honda Accord, 256,000 miles on it, and decided to put a Tesla Model S drivetrain into it. And this was pretty early on, before anyone was really doing that. So I had to find a wrecked one, and there weren't many wrecked ones at the time. And my goal was to experiment with electric, because at the time, electric cars were very new. Tesla was very new. And I kind of saw it as the future. So, and I'm a hot rodder. I'm a V8 guy. And, all the V8 guys are going, oh, electric cars don't sound like anything. They have no soul. And I wanted to see for myself. So I put it in this extremely lightweight car with a lot of power. And I think my record 0 to 60 was like 2.1 or something like that. It'd lift the front tires off the ground. So it ran 10.4 in the quarter mile. And then we got kicked out because I didn't have a cage.
Oh my goodness.
But it's easily a 9-second car. So that was a really fun experiment. And the reason I wanted to do that is because I had done, resto mods. I had done engine swaps. I had built some high horsepower cars, but it's like following the same recipe all the time. It gets a little boring. It's like, oh, I'm going to LS swap this, or I'm going to twin turbo it. Once you've done it, whatever. But the electric car was clean sheet. Mm-hmm. You had to forge your own path. And then after that was done, immediately started working on the steam car.
The opposite end of the spectrum.
Yes. But, again, it goes back to like my mechanical love, or my love of anything mechanical. So like I could watch a sewing machine, for 8 hours. It's just fascinating. Old steam ships and stuff like that are really cool. Steam trains. So I was always curious about steam, and I wanted to build something steam powered. So I designed my own boiler system, used a 2-cylinder a 2-cylinder dual action steam engine that I got from a steam launch, which is like a little tiny boat from the turn of the century. So it's like maybe 10 horsepower, something like that. Absolutely terrifying. Everything on the car was hot. If you ran it for more than 30 minutes, like the seats would get hot, the tires were hot, like everything was hot. I think I was doing like 500,000 BTUs of burner power into the boiler, and it only went like 5 miles an hour, but it was like the Willy Wonka mobile, super cool. But it was just something to satisfy my curiosity and, kind of get me thinking in new ways. And I guess I still do that to this day.
That's amazing. Yeah. I both of those just sounded so cool and so unique, especially to do them back to back. I mean, I think, like you said, a lot of people kind of get stuck in a rut of like, oh, I'll do an LS swap, and then like you said, twin turbo or supercharge it or compound charge it to be, cool. And then, you kind of don't really step back and go, well, let's look at the entirely other opposite side of the spectrum.
But you know what's really cool though is a lot of guys, they will stop at a certain spot because they don't have access to either the skill or the tools in order to do it. And that's where I was always pushing. It's like, oh, I taught myself to weld because I needed something welded. I bought the plasma because I was cutting by hand with a bandsaw or with a handheld plasma. And I bought the CNC plasma because I was like, oh man, this will unlock a new level of capability. The lasers unlock new levels of capability. Every time you learn a skill, you can do so much more than you used to. And I'm always trying to push to get that feeling. I'm always chasing the dragon of like adding on a new skill or learning a new piece of equipment so that I can do something that hasn't been done before.
Totally. Well, that's a perfect segue back into your story. So you were looking at this laser. It's, 60 grand, 70 grand.
No,
even more than that, maybe.
585,000.
That was your first laser?
Yes.
Oh, you jumped in with both feet. All right. I appreciate that. So talk me through that. You said, you're a software guy. There's something you can do there, but how does that become what SendCutSend is? Like, take me through those years.
So I really believed that there was a market for, quick turn parts, prototype parts, a quantity of one, low cost, because, I know thousands of car guys, just like me, who need access to this stuff. When I needed something made, if I needed a dash panel made with my own, gauge design in there, I could go to a local sheet metal shop and they'd be like, well, I'll make you 100 of them, or I'll make you one, but it's going to be $1,000 and you got to wait 6 weeks when we can fit it in.
Right.
And coming from the software side, understanding how they would program and nest and quote and everything, I was like, oh, I could automate all that. Very arrogantly, I was like, oh, that seems easy. I got my ass handed to me for 6 years. But, at a glance, not knowing all the intricacies, it seemed easy. And I realized that their bottleneck was, no one wanted to quote it because it cost them more to quote it than they could charge for the part. So that's why they have these like really expensive minimums when you walk into a machine shop. So I was like, I think I can automate the quoting. I think I can automate the nesting. I think I can, do some smart stuff with software. And maybe that would be a way for me to leverage, my software side, but then kind of do something that's in the physical world as well. My initial intent was to potentially license the software, out to shops to make their lives easier. But working with some of these legacy shops, like they had no interest in software. They're like, well, how am I going to fax it? I'm like, what? We're not going to use faxes. And then they're like, oh, that doesn't make any sense to me. Everyone was very reliant on paper travelers and, faxes and phone calls and all this time that I thought was wasted when the guy just needs the part. Mm-hmm. Now, granted, in aerospace and Department of Defense, yes, there has to be a little more understanding on the engineering side and back and forth and adherence to the prints and whatever. But on the hobby side or on the just, dude in his garage side, we could get away with a lot more. So once I realized that a lot of legacy shops weren't really interested in just a software package, I realized that we had to do it ourselves. So because I wanted it to be fast, because again, as a guy in my garage, I know that I only have a few hours on a Saturday. In order to work on my project, I better make those hours count. I don't want to wait 6 weeks for a part or even 2 weeks. I wanted it in a few days. So to get that level of reliability, when I was looking for equipment, I wanted something that was ultra reliable and had really, really good service and support. So some of the offshore machines were just not an option for us. So I started looking at Amada, and that's where we settled. So that's why the machine was so damn expensive. They're the Cadillac, but they also are bulletproof and has really great service. Right. So yeah, asked my wife if I could spend a shit ton of money. And for whatever reason, she said, yeah. I mean, she knew that this was my true love, not like Facebook apps. So yeah, she was feeling good that day. So put a down payment on, and here we are.
So did you loop in your friends at the time and now as your CTO and all that all at once? Like, was that like, all right, let's spin up the business, buy the machine, let's get this going? Or how did that work, the initial development? Because I imagine, especially as someone coming to manufacturing from the outside, dealing with CAD files and how to nest and, all these things that you're not that familiar with, it's kind of a daunting task. So how did you start that?
It is. And actually, I mean, that's how I still operate. I don't want to know too much about something because then I'll never do it. If I go on a hike, I don't want to know how many miles it is. Because if you're like, hey, Jim, it's 9 miles out, I'm like, I don't want to do that. Right. But if you say, hey, let's try and get up to this cool waterfall, then I'll just go along with it. And then it's the same approach that I took to fabrication. I had some rough ideas just from my own experience, but I didn't really want to understand how it was done, at that time, because it could cloud my judgment. It could sway me one way or another. So we went into it pretty blind. And we made a lot of mistakes that people had already solved. But then we also invented some brand new stuff that no one has ever seen, because we were just like, we were that green. We were so stupid that we approached something in a way that no guy ever would, but it actually worked. So back to your question, as far as like how do we get started with the team? The software company, we had an 11,000 square foot building, and it was about 5,000 or 5,500 of office, and then about 5,500 of shop space. It had this big drive-in area, and that's where like we had car projects and storage, and we had a couple 2-post lifts. So that was the hobby shop. We'd go down there at lunch and wrench on cars. And employees would come in and be like, hey, can you change my oil? Or, can you swap to my winter tires? So we were like, it was like a Jiffy Lube in the back. And so that was the space where we're like, okay, I think we can shove the laser in here and we'll kind of figure it out. So it was really cool because all of our engineers and a lot of our staff were car guys too. And some level of fabricator, or at least some interest in fabrication and manufacturing. So as we started out, like I had this built-in support, from people who were 15 feet away. I was like, hey, can you come look at this thing? Or, hey, what do you think of this code? How come it's not moving correctly? And so I could ask a lot of people. So in the early days, it was very experimental, but a very, very quick iteration speed because the people were right there. We literally had our desks right on the floor next to the laser.
Right. So I've heard you use the term dog fooding to describe your guys' development process, where you're eating your own dog food, and if it's not good, you throw it out. How long were you dog fooding this product before it was a public thing that you started taking on customer work?
I would say about a year. 2017 was the year of the plasma table. And there was a lot of experimentation and thought, no real software written against it. But but some learnings and some ideas for, expectation of quality and what types of geometry we could and could not handle. That was all wasn't really documented, but we were getting our feet wet. And then August of 2018, we actually landed the laser. And then our first sale was November 1st of 2018. So November 1. So from August to November was us trying to figure out how the laser actually works.
So you just hit your 6-year anniversary then. Congrats.
Yes. Yeah. So I remember, again, we were down at the SEMA show again, and we got an alert and like, oh my God, I think someone actually went to the website and bought something. We looked at the file. I still remember this guy had a pickleball paddle company, and our very first order were these little pickleball keychains, out of stainless steel. And we're like, oh crap, we got to get back to Reno and cut these things because we were down in Vegas. So dog fooding, it actually never stops. I guess maybe that's the answer. Cause I was thinking we had our first sale in November, but then we didn't know what the hell we were doing for like 2 years. And I still don't know if we know what we're doing. We're always iterating and improving and changing things. It was a little rough. The first 6 months, our pricing was all over the place, and which we knew. I was happy to take a risk and be like, look, I just need the data so that I can make my pricing better. And I guess what happened, the more data that we got, the more that we can refine the bell curve. You're always going to have some on the left of the bell curve that are terrible, and you lose a shit ton of money. And then you have a few on the right side that you're like, okay, cool. That's a little bit of margin. I can use that. And then the big middle is kind of where you want to be. At the very beginning, we had no bell curve. It was like a Richter scale. It was just the crazy. Left side. Yeah. Yep. And but we were learning. So we burned up a lot of money doing that. I remember we had another customer who ordered, it was around Christmas time, and they ordered all these crazy ornaments, these really intricate snowflake ornaments, used up all the machine time in the world, and at the time we weren't really pricing by machine time. It was more by like square inches and pierces. And we lost our ass on that one. And that's when me and Jacob Graham, my CTO, we looked at each other and we're like, okay, time to get really smart. So situations like that still happen today. 6 years later, I think they're going to happen for another 20 years. They'll happen for 100 years. So it's never locked in. It's always, it's always evolving.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I guess a follow-on question of that, and not to get too specific, but like how quickly does that data inform your pricing? I think a lot of us in the job shop world, whether it's laser or machining, whether we're gathering data or not, we kind of have a sense of like, oh, we've had 4 jobs in a row that I failed at, and 3 that were okay, and 1 that was great. But does that mean that I take 7 instances and reinforce my pricing model, or does it take 50, or does it take 100? Like, how quickly is that loop for you guys, roughly? Or at the beginning, I guess, maybe.
Yes, I was going to say some things are instantaneous. Some things actually happen dynamically, where we will understand that hey, we're approaching the limits of machine time. We're approaching the limits of hours in the day. And in order to throttle demand, we may have to adjust prices on a couple like slow moving materials or something to discourage them from being purchased, or in order to offset the cost of overtime or whatever. But most of it you can't do instantaneously because there's too many false negatives and false positives. So on a weekly basis, it's pretty easy for us to go back and be like, okay, how are margins? What happened? What are the outliers? What are the edge cases? And then definitely on a monthly or quarterly basis, you can see those trends. The other thing that we're fighting is we're selling a commodity material, which fluctuates all the time. So we have to dynamically adjust for commodity prices. We have to also adjust in real time for shipping challenges. So right now we're in peak season, so we get hit with a 6 or 7% peak surcharge. Sometimes we can pass that to the customer, sometimes we can't. So some stuff in real time, some stuff is backwards looking, though, no more than a quarter at a time. But really, that's my preferred way to do it, because if you react too quickly, you're reacting on edge cases, and you're going to affect way too many people. So
right, it's like a PID loop that's like way out of whack and is just all over the place.
Yeah, you just have to be really comfortable in absorbing some of those bad ones, knowing that you're going to get some good ones. But if you get a bad one, you're like, oh my God, I need to raise the cost of my machine time, or I need to charge more for how much I scrap or something like that. It could be detrimental. You could scare away too many people. So you'll never get it right. You just have to get most of them right. Not every single one.
Right. Totally. How do you deal with pricing and labor too? Because you guys are so automated. I think, you've talked about building very strong teams, but alongside that, you have a lot of automated systems. So I would imagine dividing man hours between machines when, one guy might be able to, I don't know how many machines one person can run at your company, but I would imagine quite a few, and dedicating an hour to 6 machines when it might not be exactly equal among those 6 machines. Like, how do you guys deal with labor costing?
Well, I'm going to say some stuff that my CFO is probably not going to like. Shout out to Chris. He's ex-Amazon, ex-Nordstrom, ex-Dell computer, like brilliant CFO. And we're lucky to have him. He's way out of our league, but he's a genius. He likes to see labor more how you see it, like, variable. I don't see it that way. These guys work for us. They expect a paycheck, a steady paycheck. So I don't have any variability in my labor calculations. So I know that labor is going to cost me the same amount last month as it did this month. And if there's not enough work, that's my fault. If I have guys standing around, I need to go poke at marketing, or I need to, run a discount or something like that. I need to keep the machines busy. And I see that as more of like a business development challenge than sending guys home or, trying to balance labor all the time.
Oh, totally. I meant more on part pricing. Like it seems like it would be hard. If I'm ordering one tiny part that hits your minimum, how does the labor factor into that pricing when, your guy has to hit one extra button or whatever to throw my part onto that sheet that's already on the machine?
Oh, okay, sure. Again, labor is not really a big factor for us. When we run our algorithms, we're looking at waste and machine time, a little bit of handling, like how many processes it has, like each process adds a little bit. And so we build in, some of our handling costs in there. But we don't really look at the human aspect of like, okay, how much is programming? Because programming is free to us-ish.
Right.
Loading a sheet is distributed by 100 different customers. Ideally it is.
Right.
One sheet, we can have a ton of people on there, or sometimes one sheet, we have one person. But again, it's that bell curve where it all just kind of evens out. There's some that we win, some that we lose. We will have jobs that are very, very fiddly, and we need to recut them 3 times, and then they get stuck in the time saver and, explodes that machine. And then, they're very labor intensive, but I don't account for that in our pricing. It'd just be way too hard. It'd be too manual to go back and think about, okay, well, how long is this guy actually going to carry it across the shop for? Instead, I just kind of generalize everything and use machine time as probably the biggest factor in everything that we do.
Okay, that's great. So speaking of jobs like that, where, they blow up the time saver or you have to recut them 3 times, you've been very vocal about needing processes. So what is your process for jobs that, are way off the left side of the bell curve and are learning moments? How does that get back to management? And how is that triggered? Is that automatically? Is that somebody in a traveler saying, hey, we screwed up big time? How does that work for you guys?
All of the above. And those are actually my favorite jobs because it makes us stronger. It makes us more resilient. We learn. I tell my kids, I'm like, look, you can read a book on how to play basketball, or you can go start, shooting, and seeing if you can make a few baskets. And that's kind of what we're doing. We could sit there and plan and have all these, algorithms to detect, edge cases, but we would end up turning away too much work. So we let a lot in through the door. And then when it does cause an issue, it's documented, it's logged. We have conversations. We encourage the culture of the shop floor to say, I don't want to do that again. One of the things that we reference, we'll call it an elephant. We're like, is that an elephant? And what that means is a few years ago during, again, right about this time of year, Christmas ornaments are just a nightmare for us. So we don't like to talk about those. We had this really cool lady who's an artist, and she designed these elephant ornaments, and we knew that they were a Christmas ornament, and it was pretty close to Christmas. So, they came off the deburring line, and they looked okay, but we're like, hey, let's make these really nice. This is going to be someone's Christmas gift. There was like 5 of them or 10 of them. So we're like, hey, run them through, get them really dialed in, more than we ever have. And wouldn't you know it, she was selling them on Shopify, and then we had an order for like 5,000 right after that. And we made them. However, we didn't put the exact care into them that we did that first time. And that was a huge mistake. We did our standard process, which we'd been doing for years. She got them and immediately rejected them. And so I was like, no problem, refund. We're going to make you 5,000 more, and we're going to do each one really, really nice. So we sent her 5,000 of these damn elephants for free that were perfect. Overnighted them because they had to be there before Christmas. That was chaos. So we always use that example now. We're like, hey man, is this an elephant? If you pulled it off this time, do you want to try and replicate that 20 more thousand times in the future? Because again, we're a prototype shop, but we're also a production shop. We'll do 100,000 units. We'll do, every day we have many, many jobs that are over 5,000 units. So sometimes we won't realize that, we're like, oh man, this hardware, this PEM cert was really hard to put into this location, but I got it to work, boss. I shoved in a wedge and I got it to work. I'm like, okay, dude, do you want to do that 5,000 times if we get the production order? So those learnings, and because they have the culture of knowing that there's elephants in the room, they will be very quick to document it and just walk down the hall and go to engineering and just be like, hey guys, dude, this is slipping in, and this particular geometry is killing us. Like, we can't allow this to happen. And they're like, cool, I got you. We have project managers, both remote and on the floor and in the front office too, that are the advocates for those types of things. They're the ones who are, hunting elephants all the time.
So do you have ways to set flags in the software to catch stuff like that? Or do you have somebody, roughly reviewing stuff and just giving it a good, quick second with their eyes and saying like, oh, this matches another elephant? Like, how do you, I would imagine with geometry specific flags, it's kind of hard to match those and flag those.
Yeah, both. We have a lot of automatic detections in geometry. Geometry is probably where we are the smartest. It's when you compound on all these other processes where it's deburred, bent, tapped, plus PEM hardware, plus then it goes to powder. That's where things start to break down, because we're like, okay, make sure that it has these specs in order to be powder coated. But then it has a different set of specs in order for the PEM hardware to fit in the right spot. And sometimes those overlap in a weird way where you're like, okay, I can't get powder coverage because this PEM is blocking the way, or stuff that we can't really foresee in the math. So, we have to catch those edge cases. It's a downward slope for catching those. At the beginning, we caught 1,000 a day, and now it's a handful a day, but our customers are endlessly creative. And they give us endless challenges all the time. So yes, there are flags in the software automatically, sometimes before it's even purchased. So we have different levels. We'll have a kind of a gray area where we'll throw a warning. Sometimes it's an internal warning and the customer doesn't see anything. They'll just be like, hey guys, this is odd. We haven't seen this before. Check it out. Then there's a gray area warning that we'll give to the customer. We'll be like, just so you know, this might have some deformation in it. It may not be as perfect as you want because we're going to introduce a lot of heat into these thin areas.
I have seen those warnings myself.
So we give those warnings. And then there's a hard no too. Like if it's just obvious, we're like, we ain't going to cut this, then we let them know. If it does slip through all that stuff and it goes out on the shop floor, then there's secondary procedures where, yes, we can flag it. But really, the flag goes into the reporting, and we see the reporting on a day-to-day basis to see what the trends are. I love to look at stuff as trends instead of as snapshots. And then the biggest thing, though, is the actual conversation. Like, go over to the department lead, discuss if it's possible, or if we need to make an adjustment to our procedures in order to handle 20,000 of them. Do we need to buy a piece of equipment? That's what happens a lot of times too, is these really challenging jobs will lead to really cool improvements in R&D. We'll be like, man, we can't do it today, but what if we wanted to? What would that look like? Because my goal is not to tell the customer no, it's to tell them yes, and then it's my problem. I should be the one who's solving it effortlessly behind the curtain.
Totally, yeah. So we've been talking a lot about development challenges. From the Patreon, Justin asked, what was the hardest technical development challenge you faced, whether it's software, hardware, shop floor? So you got this laser now, it's in the back of your software company. We're building up SendCutSend. Walk me through the next couple of years of challenges and, the bullet points of what you found exceptionally hard and the ways you solved them.
Scale is the number one challenge. It wasn't software. It wasn't equipment. Software is really cool because if there's an issue, you can write a new line of code and, hopefully it fixes that issue. With equipment, with service and support and smart people, if there's an equipment issue, you can fix it. Scale, there's no help for scale. When demand is coming in the door and you need to fulfill that demand, it's like everyone running around like a chicken with the head cut off. And we ran into so many weird issues. We ran out of electricity. We were using up all the amps in the building at one point. Nitrogen, we were using nitrogen in dewars, liquid nitrogen. Mm-hmm. And at one point we had every doer in the Reno area. And they were in our parking lot. And, we were using Norco and Airgas and Praxair and, every company that we could in order to get nitrogen. And they started telling us, they're like, dude, just so you know, I have to give some of this to the hospital. So whoops. So they would come and grab our tanks in the middle of the day because they needed to go refill it and drive it to a high priority client. So anyway, scale was really challenging. How much wood? Oh my God. Every skid, every pallet that we would get, all of a sudden we had all this wood. We repurpose some of the pallets, but not as many as we consume. So we had, huge stacks of wood, and then the fire marshal would come by and say that we're going to burn down the city. And, I don't know. It's a huge challenge, but it's my number one favorite thing in the world. I love to think about dumb stuff. The manufacturing side is like the game Factorio, you can add on stuff and you can fix bottlenecks. Mm-hmm. But the thing in Factorio that they don't tell you about is hey, you ran out of toilets because now that you have 70 employees in the building, there's not enough toilets to go around, uh-huh. Parking spaces, stuff like that. So
right.
Biggest challenge, but by far the most fun.
Okay. Oh, and then another one from the Patreon, Doug asked, what was the most surprising lessons learned during scaling?
Yeah, I mean, kind of what I was talking about. There was
nitrogen, bathrooms, stuff like that.
Yeah, parking, running out of dock doors, because all of a sudden you're like, oh, yeah, UPS is here and then FedEx is waiting. But then we also have a 53-foot trailer that we need to unload. And then when you have FedEx Ground and FedEx Express, and then 2 UPS guys and FedEx Freight I'm like, crap, what do we do? Literally right now at our Reno facility, we're blowing out this huge piece of lawn that's behind the building because we need asphalt so trucks can turn around. It's just very, very surprising. I would also say this one of the bigger surprises is just like the love that we've gotten from some of our customers. Like I was surprised to see that people were like starting businesses based on my business. And we have a lot of guys out there that are running, a business out of their garage or out of their kitchen table or whatever that is built on top of our platform. And I don't know why I didn't think about that, but it's just like, it's really cool, but it's also really scary because now, I have 250 employees that I have to feed. But then I also have, a couple thousand small business owners that I'm responsible for in some way too. So kind of a surprise, but again, it's like, oh, this is the right thing to be doing. Like this is so much better than B2B SaaS.
Well, speaking of love, from the Patreon, Gregory said, no questions, but tell him thank you for the easy money maker. We used to do a lot of plasma work, but now they can make and ship it for cheaper than I can buy the material. Great company to do business with. And Matt also said, longtime user, love the company and the purchasing process. So, and those were just the highlights. I had tons of messages that were just like, no questions for him, just tell him thank you. So, and awesome. As a user as well, Brad and I, we're big car guys and do a bunch of projects. We've used SendCutSend a bunch over the years. You've made windows for machines for us and all kinds of stuff. So yeah, definitely big Thank you.
You're welcome. And I love hearing, I can get parts from SendCutSend for less than I can buy the raw material. That has been our goal for a long, long time. And, as we scale, we can make it even better. So, we're buying hundreds and hundreds of tons of material per month. And we just have a totally different buying strategy than, someone who's buying a sheet at a time. So, and there's still a little bit of margin in there so that we can reinvest in the company and keep scaling, as we grow. Like our third facility is spinning up right now in Texas. And then we have plans for additional facilities because I still want to chase that dream of, order today, you get it tomorrow. And the only way for us to do that is to be proximate to our customers. So we have to be near large metros. We have to be strategically located for, one-day transit with our logistics partners. So the fact that we can still do something relatively inexpensive, but then still grow for you guys is awesome. I feel like I'm just shooting the threading the needle right now. But so far so good. I don't really see, I see a really good future for us, especially in the next couple of years with some things that we have coming out.
Awesome. Well, actually that brings up a point. So Doug's question was, what would today's Jim tell younger and not so wise Jim the day he founded the company? And I've heard you on I think it was the Arc Junkies podcast say, you wish you had told young Jim to not do quick turn work because it's so hard. But the other side of that is in your X article, you mentioned how quick turn work and being responsive to customers is one of those knobs we can turn to bring things, reshore things, take work away from China. So how do you balance that? I mean, as I operate a very short turn machine shop. I know those struggles on a much smaller scale. It is a real pain. How do you balance all that?
It goes back to knowing too much. These questions of, what would Jim tell younger Jim? It's like, you don't want to mess with time travel, right? It's like, right. It's like Back to the Future. You can screw up a lot of things. If I knew now back then, like, hey, quick turn is a huge pain in the ass. Yeah, maybe I would have shied away from it. But because I was young and dumb and didn't know any better, it actually put us into a really good spot. I guess, one of the things that I would tell younger Jim is think bigger. So when I first started, it was for hobbyists and for guys like me in their garage. And I think from day one, if I would have started towards like, hey, we're going to handle prototypes and big production runs, and we're going to do this, quick turn service that's so good that we're competing, with China and we're reshoring all this stuff. I I think we would have been a little bit further than where we are today. But I also needed all those lessons for the last 6 years to get us where we are. So there's this push to like grow as fast as possible. But I think that you can make a lot of mistakes that are very difficult to recover from if you grow too fast. I could have burned down the whole company by expanding too quickly. We would have run out of money, and I'd have to let go of everyone and go bankrupt. So growing at just the right speed, we tend to be just behind our demand curve. So right when we're out of capacity, we're starting to add up a little bit more. We never have capacity ahead of demand. It's just, it's never worked out that way. We're always so fragile.
To be fair, financially, that's probably a good thing though. Like it would be wonderful to have excess capacity, but I think that most of us growing businesses, that's just not the way it works. You have to feel a little bit of that struggle of the late nights or something to really be like, all right, I need to buy that next machine, or I need to hire more people or whatever.
Yeah, I can't imagine, being private equity backed and have all this pressure from a board or something saying, you need to spend all this money, you need to do all this stuff. Because if it fails big time. So yes, we are going a little bit slower than we probably could, especially with a bunch of outside investment. But it is the right speed. We're able to learn and make a couple mistakes along the way and recover. So yeah, I don't know. I'm pretty happy. I always think like, what could I go back and do better? But if I did it better, then I wouldn't have learned something. So here we are.
Yeah, you wouldn't be where you are today. I very often have to remind myself that because I think back on some things. I'm like, well, I wish I would have done that differently. It's like, you kind of really like where you are though. Like let's focus on that.
Totally.
So you've mentioned growth. You hire a lot of people. You talk about your great team. How do you hire people and incentivize people to come to you in the markets that you're in? Because you're in some very competitive areas that have, Tesla and other big companies with big benefits packages. Like, how do you draw talent to you guys?
Yeah, you have to be a nice company. My VP of operations, Brian Wolf, he says that, people don't quit companies, they quit their managers. And I agree with that. I've worked in some shitholes before, but I had a great manager and I still liked coming into work, even though it was backbreaking or sweaty or whatever. So, having really good leadership, people that you would want to work for, one of our tests is, would I want to have a beer with this guy? And, I want everyone to be able to say like, man, my manager is firm, but fair. But I wouldn't mind having a beer with them. So another big thing is just quality of life on a day-to-day basis. The way we structure everything is how I would want it personally. I like things that are well lit. I like heating. I like air conditioning. I like music. I like a clean environment. I don't want to go blow my nose and it comes out black on the Kleenex, so dust collection, air conditioning, snacks in the kitchen. We cater 2 meals every single day. All of our vending machines are, well, most of them are free. We have a new thing. We have this micro market. It's like, like at the gas station, they have those like triangle sandwiches and burritos that you can heat up and stuff. So we have that. Everyone gets like $45 or $50 a week or something to spend on those additional snacks. But because that's what I want. I have a desk out on the floor, and when I'm out there, I don't want to be sweating if I'm just sitting at a laptop, let alone working. So in Paris, Kentucky, we put in $300,000 worth of air conditioning. So it's an investment, but that's how you get good workers. You get people who oftentimes they're skeptical at the beginning because their friends have referred them or something like that. And they're like, well, what kind of cult are you running over here? Because everyone speaks so highly of it. But then once they actually get in there and they realize that we do care about our people, then they stay for a long time. And retention is critical. As much as I've been learning day to day over the last 6 years, the guys on the floor are learning at twice the speed. So all of that knowledge is going into their brain. It's in my best interest to keep them. And, a guy on his first day, he's probably doing 4 times the output on his 365th day. So if you want to pay a guy, $30 an hour to start, and then in a year he's making, 40, it's actually like you're getting $120 worth of value, because there's so much learning that he's done. There's so much efficiency. There's a big investment, but it pays back, multiple times.
Totally. Yeah. So as someone who is very process focused, how do you go about having employees like that document their learning so that the training becomes better and that it isn't lost? And, as much as we would all love it, some people just don't stay at a company. And I would imagine you have to have some way to capture those learnings.
Yeah, no, agreed. What I've learned, one of the biggest things that I've learned at this company is everyone is different. I think it's really easy as an owner to think that everyone thinks how you do. If I see a problem, I'm like, I'm going to go tell somebody, or I'm going to write this down so it doesn't happen again. We do have people like that. And then we also have people that are just like, well, I guess that's, the 8th time that this machine is broken. I guess it's going to break, 100 more times, and they'll just keep going. So being able to adapt your process for each individual personality is the biggest challenge. But the way that we do that, we actually have dedicated trainers who go around and speak with, everyone and figure out what's going easy, what's going hard, what should we stop doing and never do again, what should we start doing immediately, who on your team deserves recognition, who on your team deserves, some critical feedback. So you have to pull these things out of people on the floor. There are some that will just like kick open my door or go find me in the kitchen and just be like, Jim, we're fixing this right now. And then there's some where you sit down with them and you're like, oh my God, how come you haven't told me this? And they're like, I don't know, no one ever asked or whatever. So you have to be able to accommodate both. So you can have some squeaky wheels too that are maybe a little more dramatic than the others. And so you have to temper their enthusiasm a little bit. And then others are ultra quiet, but that they have all this knowledge. So you got to go pull it out of them. I'm a big fan of, I guess psychology. I'm very interested in how the human mind works, and especially from a business and management perspective. And when you realize that people will not often give themselves like praise or criticism, but you can get that out of them about a team member. It's kind of this like third party approach that we'll use to go around and get what the real story is. Cause they won't say like, hey man, I'm working my ass off. But they will say like, hey, these 5 other guys aren't working very hard. And then when we look at the metrics, we're like, oh, it's because this person is kicking ass. So a lot of indirect ways of getting information is really important with getting that feedback that you can use to improve your process.
Okay. I love that. I hadn't really thought about that, people are much, much more likely to talk about somebody else. That's very interesting. So the other side of the growth coin, the other question from Matt on the Patreon was, in the future, will he be able to specify tab placement again? He was able to back in the day. And I kind of wanted to broaden this out, and we had a lot of questions come in from from Instagram about, when will I see this material? When will I see this process? How do you guys go about adding and subtracting materials and adding processes? Somebody asked about material leveling. Somebody wanted 3/8 titanium. Like, how do you guys, what can we do to encourage SendCutSend to carry the material that I want? And then how do you guys go about buying new equipment for, when you guys added anodize or added bending, things like that?
Yeah, definitely it's a 2-sided process. we try and identify needs internally as often as we possibly can. A lot of our staff are customers, especially in our R&D team. They use the product 5 times a day. We're all ordering stuff. Our rule is actually, you can't just go out on the floor and make something or whatever. You have to order it through the website and you have to wait for it to be shipped to your house. And that way we can actually test our delivery times. We can test, packaging. We can see if it arrived with a piece of candy in it or not, So we test everything, and usually from internal needs, we'll be like, hey man, we're missing this tab size, or hey, how come we don't have this thickness? Like we just added a bunch of 5/16 thick materials we haven't carried for a long time. And we're just like, well, that's stupid. I don't realize a lot of this is legacy, because in the early days, we were so cache and space constrained that we're like, okay, what are the top 4 metals and thicknesses? That's all we're going to carry. And then we went to 8, and then we went to whatever. We are less constrained on inventory spend right now, but we are constrained on space. So we have to be very careful about what we add to the catalog. It has to be popular enough. So the way that we do that, we do have a suggest a material feature on our website, where if you don't see what you're looking for, you can click and fill out a form. A lot of it comes from support. So our support team is great about listening. So if you write in to support@SendCutSend.com and say, hey man, I really need this PEM, or I need this thickness, or I need this feature, it will be documented. And then we go through and usually we stick an intern on it, because people will call things different things. So in the spreadsheet, they might be, I don't know, they might be calling a powder coat color 15 different RAL colors, but at the end it's just blue.
Right.
So we try and put it in categories and go, okay, this is what we need to carry. We carry the majority of popular stuff right now. There's a bunch of edge cases that we do need to handle, especially in the world of PEM, powder coat colors. Materials, we're pretty good. Like that 3/8 titanium. Yes, we probably could carry that. But the demand just isn't there, so we'll take that vote, but I really need like 10 votes. I need probably 20 votes. Again, going back to psychology, that 1 vote probably means that there's 10 out there. 10 votes means that there's probably 100 out there, because when you think about people who actually take the time to raise their hand, there's 10 or 100 of those guys who don't take the time to tell us. So the feedback is really important. Tell us through support, tell us through the suggested material. We have a new feature coming out that you're going to be able to recommend just about anything for us, not just materials or whatever, but it'll be PEMs, taps, powder coat colors, all these different like suggest things. And we're tracking them a little bit differently so we can move faster. But then our R&D department is working all day, every day on new materials and stuff. So Buna and rubber and neoprene and foam, those are all like in R&D right now. Gasket material, Feld Pro gasket material is coming. Sometimes it's not as easy as just adding a material though. We have to go through testing. We have to make sure that all the MSDS stuff is correct. Sometimes we need to buy dedicated equipment. Like for our water jets, we actually need a dedicated water jet that runs water only instead of water plus abrasive for some of these new materials. So instead of just ordering something and then having it ready to stock in a week, it's like all of a sudden it turns into a 6-month project to make it happen. So anyway, a long way of saying just keep being vocal about it. We'll give you more ways to be vocal. But we are listening, and every single one of those things is read. So I get a notification every time we get a suggestion. So yeah, usually after a whiskey or whatever, I'll go through all those and be like, no. Yes. Okay. Great idea. So.
Okay. Yeah. I'm guessing reading Matt's question, I'm guessing that specifying tab placement was probably ending up as a elephant from time to time. People just not knowing where and stuff to.
Yeah. Sorry. I forgot that part of the question. I tend to ramble, so I apologize. Tab placement. Yes, in the early days, we were able to say, where do you want this tab? Because we had that micro tab to keep it from falling through into the bed of the laser. They're about, depending on the material, 10 thou to 15 thou of like a little tab on there. Initially, we allowed the tabs to be placed. However, as our nesting algorithms got more and more complex, it's very difficult to allow a customer to specify a tab and then for us to nest it efficiently. So we're running this nesting algorithm, thousands and thousands of times as the sheet starts to get full in order to maximize our yield and to make sure that we aren't going to have tip ups or have production issues or have, loss of part or something like that. So sometimes a customer will want to place a tab in a location that could cause a head connection, or it's not strong enough for the part to actually be held in the material. So we had to kill that off. Going forward, there's actually two things that I want to do. One is we'll remove the tab for you. So in our deburring department, we're building a system so that tab removal is an option, especially if you're going to get it powder coated, like let's remove that tab. We're moving so fast that we haven't done that. But now I think it's probably time, and we'll charge a very small fee for that. And then the other one that we're going to do is allow them to put in a suggested tab placement. So we can't guarantee that we will adhere to that, because we may run into some issue that we have to override. But I bet for 85% of them, it'll be an okay placement. Some people want it on a corner. Some people want it on a flat. Some people, want it on an inside corner or something weird. But as our CAD gets smarter, I don't want to be a CAD company, but we do have to give people tools in order to, edit their designs a little bit. We do a lot of it in the background, but the more that we can expose to the user and the more control that we can give the user, the better their experience is. So we're making huge investments into, our very simple CAD system that we use today, whether that's Parts Builder or our 3D Preview or whatever, measurement tools, adjustment tools, ways to like delete a piece of geometry if you don't want it, things like that. So that's coming in 2025.
Awesome. That is super cool. I'm sure Matt will be stoked. Another great question from Instagram. Andrew Henry asked, he wanted to know what you see the pros and cons of vertical integration for a small company, and where outsourced services like SendCutSend make more sense than bringing processes in-house. And the reverse of that is, when would you talk a company out of using SendCutSend?
I rarely talk them out of using us, unless we just don't make sense. Honestly, like when their part volume starts to get to a place where stamping makes a lot of sense, we will recommend stamping. Our concept of churn. So in software, especially SaaS, you have a concept of churn. You're like, okay, I got 100 users, but 10 of them canceled, and I got 11 new ones. So I net positive 1. In manufacturing, we don't really see churn. We don't have a subscription service, so people just order when they need to. And for a long time, I was kind of bragging about that. I'm like, oh, this is so much better than SaaS. Because I have no churn. People just disappear for a little bit, but then they'll come back. So there's no actual churn. And then we discovered we do have churn, and it's rare, but it happens when it makes sense for the company to have their own equipment. We've had multiple customers that we have actually introduced to Amada equipment and been like, hey, they're like, hey, Jim, I love you guys, but the product is taken off and we're going to bring it in-house. What should I buy? We're like, okay, here's a laser that you should consider, whatever. So we have a handful of clients that have purchased their own equipment and gone more vertical, and it made sense for them. I'm trying to prevent that though. I want to make sure that I can run all this stuff and scale and have enough excess capacity to where no one would ever have to leave me. I want to be able to handle the prototype guys and the full production. If I could get into stamping at some point, that's awesome too. Use us from prototype to production. That's really the goal for us, to have these lifelong customers. Our rule internally for when we should go vertical and when not to is, can we cut a check for it? If someone has a great piece of software out there, just buy it. like accounting software. That's not something I want to do. We tried actually. We built our own time clock at one point to track hours, and and then we're like, oh crap, it's it's Memorial Day, and we forgot to have like a holiday schedule in there. And then what happens when it's daylight savings time? We ran into all these stupid edge cases where I was like, why are we a time clock company? We should be spending this time on the problems that I can't just cut a check for. So same thing with accounting software. Just someone else out there is building great stuff. Just use it. However, if you cannot cut a check for it because it's novel, it does not exist, that's where your time should be spent. So if I am a product manufacturer and a third-party service is doing a great job, cool, just use them. Just have them as a partner and focus on what you can't outsource. Maybe it's some sort of, electronics development, or maybe it's your marketing or something like that. If you can outsource the manufacturing and focus on sales or whatever you do best, that's the way to make it work. At some scale, yeah, you can do it, but you're going to have all those same problems as me. You're going to have a bunch of nitrogen doers sitting in your parking lot. You're going to have a bunch of pallets, taking up parking spaces. Manufacturing is hard. So go vertical when it makes sense.
Totally. Yeah. Okay. I like that. So speaking of software though, that you buy, I would imagine, does ERP meet that quality, or is it so integrated with the rest of your system that an ERP is something that you guys developed?
Yeah. I didn't even know what ERP was until a couple of years ago. And they're like, what do you use for your ERP? And I'm like, I don't know what that means. We just have our app that we built. Our culture, our culture, especially from a software engineering perspective, is, like that time clock is a great example. If we need something, we add it to the platform. So as far as inventory control and purchasing and scheduling and nesting and package tracking and quality and all this other stuff is stuff that we have built in on an as needed basis and then continually refined. So we don't outsource any of that software. But I don't think I could actually sell our software now because it is designed to handle our shop and our shop uniquely. I don't think it would work for anybody else. It's the way we do stuff is too weird. But I think that means it's the perfect fit for us.
Yeah. I mean, I think a bespoke solution is always going to be the best. It's just very often not the easiest for a lot of us non-software guys. I look at something like that and it just sounds like the absolutely insurmountable. Whereas I think coming from a software background, it sounds like, a relatively, maybe not easy solution, but the right solution for you guys.
Yeah. I guess I would say, to any entrepreneur or business owner, it's all about building the team. I am not a software guy. My code is shit. I can do HTML and CSS, but what I do know is how to spec a good product and how to work with a team of really talented people. So I see a lot of small business owners kind of fall on their face because they believe as the owner, they have to be the best at everything. I have to be the best machinist. I need to know how to run the Swiss machine better than anybody. I need to know how FedEx labels work better than anybody. I need to know how to balance our QuickBooks better than anybody because I'm the boss. And that's 100% not true. You have to trust. And oftentimes as an entrepreneur, it's really hard to trust other people because usually you're going to be high performing at some level. But when it comes to software talents are more common than they ever have been. And as a small business owner, if you need software, there are people out there that you can chat with and be like, hey man, how do I solve this problem? And let's see what they come up with. The best way that you can approach software engineers is not with a solution, it's with a problem. Don't tell them how to solve it because they will get really snippy. But just say, hey man, I have this problem. And they'll come back with 10 solutions. They're engineers and software happens to be their canvas that they're using. So there's, even at the community college level, or the new graduate level, or even people in college, they're like, hey man, I know JavaScript or I know some Python, plus with AI and things like Copilot and stuff, people are building, kind of hacky software solutions, but they work and they work at a small scale. As you go larger in scale and you have to support, thousands and thousands of customers, then you do need true architecture in there and some experience. But for a one-off, talk to your buddy.
Okay. So actually you brought up an interesting point. As I would say hybrid software plus manufacturing company, have you felt a external push to AIify everything and like to add some kind of AI tool? Have you been pushed by your internal teams to do that? I would imagine, like, it seems to me like a lot of the VC backed companies are the ones that are immediately jumping on that hype train. But like, have you guys felt that push at all?
Yes. Yes. I started smiling as soon as you said that. So, I'm a bootstrapper. I've financed my own companies. In this company, we did take a little bit of outside money. We took a tiny amount of money during a seed round because my wife was like, "Why the hell are you buying millions of dollars worth of machines with our savings? You're insane." And I was like, "Fine, I'll give up a little bit of equity for some cash because this is a very capital intensive business." I say that phrase in that tone because that's a term that I learned. I had no idea what the hell that meant. And people were like, "It's capital intensive." I was like, "What does that mean? Does that just mean it takes a lot of money? Just say that. What the hell is wrong with you people?" Anyway, took a little bit of money, and this was 5 years ago, and haven't needed any money ever since. And actually, the money helped. We never really used it, but it acted as a safety net because at the time I was like, dude, if our bank account goes below a certain level, we are screwed. So it never hit that level, but the safety net of having a little cash in the bank allowed us to move faster. So I have the best investors in the entire world. They just let me run because they have no idea what manufacturing is. And they're like, "Jim, I don't know what you guys do over there, but just keep doing it." Except for every once in a while, they'll be like, "So what are you doing about AI?" I'm like, "I'm not doing shit." It doesn't make any sense. From a documentation perspective, we're going through ISO 9001 right now. AI actually helps there quite a bit, making checklists, writing up like SOPs and job descriptions. LLMs are really cool at that. Machine learning is actually really cool too. Something that you can feed in and it can start to recognize like, hey, you win on these jobs, you lose on these, here's the similarities, whatever. I don't call that AI. That's true machine learning. Mm-hmm. That is something that we're a fan of. But other AI, as far as like pricing or whatever, dude, we're not there yet. We're risky enough as it is with our pricing and the way we run our bell curves. I don't need some Chat GPT going in there and getting wild. It's evolving really, really rapidly. And I think in a couple of years, we may be able to dabble into it a little bit more. But it's not quite there yet.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. So you mentioned ISO 9001, and that actually brought up another one of my questions. How do you balance building a business that is both used by, the absolute bootstrapper consumer trying to finish his car in his garage up to Fortune 500 and giant aerospace companies? ISO brings a lot of extra paperwork, things like that. How are you dealing with that to keep your costs similar to where they are and, not price yourself out of you 10 years ago or 15 years ago?
Yeah. We've always treated every customer the same. So we treat our big aerospace customers the same as the guy in his garage, which means the Fortune 50s get worse service than they're used to. but the guys in their garage are getting the best service that they've ever had in their entire life. So the really big guys will come in and demand all this stuff. And they want to put their name on our insurance riders. They want us to sign off on these like crazy legal agreements and non-competes and stuff. And we just say, no, but if you want your parts like in a couple of days, you should probably place the order now. And 10 out of 10 times they do. So we have a bunch of champions, internally in these companies. The engineers who actually need the part to get their job done, and they will go to legal or they will go to accounting or they'll go to wherever and just be like, look, I just need my parts, like figure it out, make them a vendor, whatever. So I love that. But I don't want to make their lives too hard. So we are trying to, do all the documentation. What I found out about ISO 9001 is like, I think most businesses are ISO 9001. If you're doing the right thing, if you have any kind of process that's repeatable, you meet most of the requirements. Just the documentation side, initially is the big challenge, and then the audit so that you can get it. But we kind of did a self audit, and I was like, oh, we've been doing this stuff for years because it's just common sense. So it's a pain in the ass, and I feel like it's a shakedown for money. But if it helps some, lawyers sleep at night, because the vendor is ISO 9001 certified, then so be it. But I guess to answer your question, we treat everybody the same. It's way more scalable for us instead of having like multiple paths, down a road. It's like, oh, they have to go this path because they're DFARS, or they have to go this path because they're ITAR or whatever. We just treat everyone the same. We're like, okay, shit, now everybody's ITAR now. Or all of this material that all these guys want to be DFARS compliant, now that's just what we're going to stock.
Gotcha.
So it's easier for us. It's more expensive in some ways, but it saves us time and money in 100 other ways.
Okay. So I know you're not a big what could have been person, as we've talked, but going back to Doug's question of what you would have told yourself younger, do you wish you would have done ISO earlier when you were a smaller company to make it part of your processes earlier?
I would just say quality in general. Putting a more emphasis on documented quality standards. If doing that earlier would have made our lives a little easier. The issue that happened was in the very, very early days, there was about 5 of us, and we all just knew what to do. We knew how to look at a part and go, yeah, I would like that. As a customer, yep, that meets my standards, as far as tolerance and cosmetic finish and all this other stuff. But now with, 3 locations, and we run 4 shifts, 24/7, and we're hiring new people all the time. We hired over 100 people in this last year. Not everyone knows, what a good part looks like. And a couple of years ago, like, we would see customer support issues and they'd send a photograph, and I'm like, how did that go out the door? Oh my God. Just the poor person didn't know any better. So that forced us to have, more dedicated quality staff and more documentation. I would have done that a little bit earlier, but we're in a really good spot now.
How do you deal with quality? Is it hard gauging? Is it vision systems? Is it just training of your floor personnel? I would imagine, I know the bar, it depends on the kind of part. Sometimes you can have a very high bar for laser cut stuff. And then sometimes people are like, I don't know, it looks better than my plasma table. I don't care. Like, send it, So how do you guys deal with that wide breadth of quality standards?
Yeah, there is. We were actually thinking about, having a discount where it's you click a box that says, just send it. And it just tells all the quality personnel, like, hey, if it's a little imperfect, these guys don't give a shit. They're going to weld on it. They're going to paint it. They're going to do whatever, or it's going to be buried inside an assembly. We haven't quite done that yet because, again, that splits it off into 2 different paths, and you have 2 different expectations that you have to decide on. Quality and understanding tolerances and everything. A lot of that is secret sauce for us because we have to do it so quickly at such a massive scale. I can tell you the number one trick is just buying awesome equipment. So our Amada fiber lasers are incredible when it comes to repeatability. And when you get those things dialed in, you can just expect that everything is going to come off there within tolerance. If it is not in tolerance, 100 times out of 100, it is the customer's file. And we've had all kinds of people that are like, oh my God, I ordered a 100 thou hole and it came out, 110. And we're like, okay, let's look at your drawing. I'm like, wow, that measures out at 110. I'm like, oh shit. They're like, I sent you the wrong revision. We're sorry. Because when people are like, hey man, this is way out of tolerance, like we would know immediately. We cut a first article on every piece of material that goes in the machine and we double check it. And if that thing's dead nuts, everything that's coming off that machine is dead nuts. So that's probably the easiest way is just starting, garbage in, garbage out is what we say. So it comes down to material too. Like we buy really high grade material compared to some others. We don't use any offshore material except for titanium. I don't know where titanium comes from.
That one's a little tough for sure.
Yeah. But, and brass. I think brass is, it's globally sourced. I don't know where brass comes from, but a lot of our stuff is high quality. Comes from, American mills. So we're starting out with really good stuff. We're putting out really good equipment with guys who are highly trained. It just makes the quality team's life so much easier.
That's amazing. How long does it take a typical machine operator to be trained from day one to where you're trusting them to make perfect parts?
We say 40 hours.
Wow.
We have a shadowing program where I was like, look, you have to be under a master for 40 hours. Please just be at their hip. That has happened 0 times.
I was going to say like 100 times that. Like 100 days sounds like a good, if you have a killer process. But a week's worth of work sounded a little small.
Yeah. Usually, so a couple of our shifts are 410s. So if they start on a Monday, by Thursday, they can be trusted to run it. And, we train all of our shifts on the primary shift. So on what we call A shift. So we want to get them trained up and then go to their true shift, their destination shift as quickly as possible. But I was laughing at, we say 40 hours. It's almost never that. I'll walk through the floor and I see a new guy just over there by himself running the machine. I'm like, hey man, where's your trainer? How's it going? And I'll watch him for a little bit. It's like, okay, these guys know what's going on. And I credit that to not only our trainers, but to our process. And our recruiting, honestly. When we recruit, there's a number of tests and steps that they have to pass in order to make it to the floor. And so they're pre-qualified a little bit, and then our trainers are great, and then our process is just simple. I'm a big believer in just tell me what to do next. We call it the Pez dispenser. It's like when you open up the Pez dispenser, it's just, here's what's next, go for it. I don't want to make the jobs so dumb that the people are like disappointed or there's no creativity or whatever, but I should offload, the really difficult decisions or eliminate the decisions that could cause a big problem. And we've done a really good job of that.
Awesome. Well, that brings me to the last few questions that I ask every guest every week. First up, what did you research this week? Doesn't need to be manufacturing related, just what's been popping up in your browser.
It is manufacturing related. I'm trying to understand some basics of CAM for 5-axis. And that's really interesting to us. Moving into multi-axis subtractive is something we've dabbled with off and on. But it's where I want to head. I got on this big rant about, onshoring and, competing with China. And I think it's 100% possible. You just have to do it at a bigger scale than we're doing it today. And so I think we've proven that in sheet metal and I would love to do some attempt of it in multi-axis subtractive. However, it's going to be the SendCutSend method, which is, this is what you get. If it fits, great. It's like In-N-Out Burger. The menu is tiny, but it's fast, cheap, and good. So that'll be what we offer, when it comes to CNC machining. If you need, +0, -1 on some critical feature or something, we're not going to be it. I'm going to chuck it in the machine and hit go.
Right.
However it comes out, that's how I'm going to send it. So, but there is a market for that. And I think that can help a lot of people in the US, support their business. All these guys who have these little businesses on the sheet metal side, I'd love to see them using our little billet parts, in their offerings as well.
Totally. Yeah, that's amazing. What's a tip from this week that you can share?
All meetings need to be on the floor. So we have conference rooms, we have the front office, and I think even a tiny shop usually has a desk somewhere where there's a lot of meetings. Don't do that. Do it standing up, walking the floor. If you need to talk to remote staff and you need a TV and a camera and stuff, fine. That's an exception. But walking the floor and having a meeting, I guarantee you'll always see something. And you will be more visible to the rest of the staff. If there's leadership, or engineering or something, and they're out on the floor, you're way more likely for a staff member to walk up to you guys and be like, "Hey, you're an engineer, right? Hey, when you're done, I want to show you this thing that could be a cool fix or whatever." So if you can't have the desks out on the floor, definitely have all meetings out on the floor.
Awesome. And then what is a win from this week or the past week that you can share with us?
We got a new nitrogen generation system. So we use liquid bulk. We have I think we have a 9,000 gallon tank in Reno, and we have like 16,000 gallons in Kentucky. But in addition to that, for redundancy, we run our own nitrogen generation system too. They're power hungry, but it's critical. If that liquid truck does not show up, we are screwed. So we got a newer, bigger, better one. And the big win is Drew Miles, who heads up R&D. He somehow managed to fit this like 3,000 gallon buffer tank that's like 14 feet tall. He fit it through a 12-foot door and got it placed on a forklift. Probably not OSHA standard, but we were so happy to see that thing actually fit.
Wow. That's crazy that you guys are using that much nitrogen, that you're generating your own liquid nitrogen. Truly amazing.
Yeah, it's, we vaporize the material and then we have to blow it out of that kerf under very high pressure. So sometimes we're using, upwards of 450 PSI of nitrogen or oxygen or air. The assist gas and the blend changes based on our needs. So that's one thing they don't tell you when you're buying the laser. They don't tell you how thirsty this thing's going to be for power and nitrogen and consumables. And then what are you going to do with all the scrap and stuff? It looks really pretty in the showroom, but then then you realize that you have to have this whole freaking supply chain to keep the damn thing running.
Oh my goodness. Do you guys do like sound ducting in your warehouses? Because I imagine it is ear splitting with that many machines all blowing 450 PSI of air.
It's not as loud as you would think. It's 450 PSI, but it's through a, 20 thou hole. So it's very, very targeted. And then the machines are enclosed. It's not as bad. I would say the noisiest thing that we have are water jets. And their intensifier pump is really loud, 60,000 PSI hydraulic pump that is running. So we've tried various ways to enclose that thing. And as soon as you enclose it, it needs more ventilation, then the ventilation leaks all the sound out. So we're always battling that kind of stuff. But yeah, that goes back to me saying, I have a desk out on the floor. I want to be heated, cooled, well lit, and not ear splitting. So our shops are actually pretty nice. It's easy for us to give a tour and to recruit somebody, because it's not, a terrible shop. My goal is, if a guy is taking his son through the shop and saying like, "Hey, this is where your dad works," I want that son to be like, "Wow, this is such a cool place, Dad." God forbid they're like, "Oh, I feel so bad for my dad. He has to go into that dark, scary place."
Yeah, so that would be terrible.
So that's our goal.
That's amazing. Well, Jim, thank you so much for joining me. It has been great to get to know you a little bit more, hear the whole backstory, dive into all this stuff. I think that you have built a company that many of us aspire to, and also that we all use. So thank you so much.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks for the opportunity. And like I said, feel free to reach out to me, or our support team. Let us know what's working, what isn't, and we'll make it right.
Will do. Well, thank you. And thanks to new Patreon members, Alexander, Jim, and Daniel. You make this show possible. And yeah, thank you so much. Thank you all for listening. And I will be back next week.